The story above shows us that she thought he was just a poor customer. Until he fired her on the spot, clearly reflects the discrimination based on appearance and social prejudices that many people encounter in daily life. Although the employee may not have meant it, her actions showed an unpleasant reality. People often judge others by their appearance, by external factors without caring about their true inner values. The fact that the employee thought the man was just a poor customer is a manifestation of ignorance and disrespect for the people around her. She judged him based on what she saw, forgetting that each person has their own story and values. The incident became full of surprises when he turned the situation around and fired the employee on the spot, an action that clearly shows that not everyone can easily tolerate discrimination and contempt. The story is also a reminder that in a modern society, we need to overcome prejudices and learn to judge people based on their sincerity, character, and behavior, instead of just looking at their appearance or circumstances. People cannot be measured by what they own or what we see at first sight. It is their attitude and how they treat others that determine their true worth. The lesson from this story is to be careful of hasty judgments and remember that everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter who they are or where they come from. Respect and kindness will always be a solid foundation for building healthy and lasting relationships. Madeline's throat tightened, her heart pounding as she took in Jordan's cold expression. Her mind raced, trying to come up with an explanation, an excuse, but nothing could salvage the situation. She could only remain silent, helpless. Jordan tilted his head, his eyes following her patiently, as if he had anticipated this outcome. "So," he began, his voice calm, unhurried, "you refused to do business with me because I couldn't afford it, right?" Madeline opened her mouth to respond, but Jordan continued. "You made false assumptions and refused me. You lied about company policy, and when I asked you to clarify, you made it worse." He exhaled, shaking his head. "I want to know, Madeline, what a truly valuable client looks like to you." His words were like a punch to the gut, leaving her breathless. She tried to force a smile, but it was just a small crack, unable to hide the confusion rising inside her. You misunderstand, Jordan," she said, her voice shaking. "I just want to protect the company's standards. We can't work with unsuitable clients." Jordan raised his eyebrows, not hesitating. "You're not talking about the client, Madeline. You're talking about you. And I think you'll understand better if I say it straight, you have no place here." His words were like a punch to the face. Madeline couldn't get any words out. She stood there, frozen, her body drained of strength. She had built a career here, done everything to make it a success. But now, none of that mattered. Jordan stood looking at her, no satisfaction in his eyes. He said nothing, just looked at her with understanding, as if this was a story he had witnessed many times. "Don't worry," he said calmly. "I'll review the whole operation here." Madeline felt as if she had been thrown out of this world, with nowhere to run. There was only a thick, suffocating silence. Jordan turned to look at her one last time. "I hope you learned something from this. Because the loss here is not just your job. It's your opportunity to do better." Without a word, Madeline stood there, her heart clenched. Jordan nodded once and left, leaving her to deal with everything that had collapsed. His heart was pounding in his chest. He knew something was wrong, knew that today would be different from any other day. And Madeline, for the first time since he had met her, looked as if she were about to cry. The oppressive silence in the room made him feel suffocated. No one spoke, no one moved. Madeline blinked rapidly, her hands shaking, clearly trying to figure out how to make sense of the situation. This had to be a mistake, some kind of mistake. How could the man in front of her, whom she had just criticized so harshly, be the CEO of the company? At this moment, Tuan, a colleague sitting nearby, spoke up softly, but his tone was full of hidden meaning. "Jordan, I think there's a misunderstanding here. You definitely don't understand our work process." Jordan didn't answer right away. He let the silence drag on, his eyes looking at Madeline, his eyes filled with indescribable disappointment. Madeline swallowed, trying to calm herself. She'd been in this business for 10 years, faced stressful situations, but this was different. Jordan sensed her hesitation, he knew Madeline couldn't take the truth easily. The coldness in his voice only added to the tension. "So, Madeline," Jordan said, his voice low, "when are we going to start treating all our customers fairly? Especially those who aren't like you?" Madeline looked up, her mouth dry, but she couldn't find an answer. Jordan turned to her other colleagues, who were looking at her like she was a hunted prey. She'd never felt so lost. Jordan's words were a slap in the face, an unforgettable humiliation. "This is the last time," Jordan added, when he turned to look at her again. "If your behavior is what I saw today, don't expect to do it again." Madeline couldn't say another word. All she could do was stand there, tears filling her eyes but unable to cry. She had lost everything in a moment, it all ended today. He stood there, not saying a word, just looking at her. A half-smile played on his lips, as if he knew something she didn't. Then, without hurrying, he turned and walked away slowly, as if he wanted to leave some mark, some unspoken message. Greg felt a shiver run down his spine. There was something about the way he moved, like he was deliberately slowing down time, wanting everything to be noticed. Greg couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was as if he was waiting for the right moment, just waiting for the decisive move. Greg glanced at Madeline, who was still smiling professionally, talking to the man in the suit. But her attention didn't stray from the car the man was inspecting, a classic, silver Porsche. The man wasn't in a hurry. He just ran his hand lightly over the shiny surface of the car, as if he were studying every detail, as if the car were not just an object, but part of something bigger. Greg tried not to notice, but his eyes couldn't help but follow the man's every move. He didn't leave, even though everything around him was quiet. The air was heavy, as if something was about to explode. Madeline saw him, her eyes flickering with hesitation. She knew who he was. But she didn't want to admit it. She stood there, keeping her face cold. While the other man walked closer, looking at another car, another luxury car. He wasn't in a hurry, nor did he seem flustered. Greg heard footsteps approaching. Another man, well-dressed, stepped through the glass door. It was Elliot Gaines, the regional manager. He stepped forward, not looking at Madeline, but looking straight at the other man. A quick handshake and his recognition made the atmosphere even more tense. "Jordan, I was just about to call you," Elliot smiled, but the smile couldn't hide the surprise in his voice. Jordan smiled slightly, looking around, as if he didn't care about anything around him. He had completely captured the attention of the entire showroom. And then, right in front of Madeline, Elliot introduced himself. "This is Jordan Ellis, the new CEO of Hamilton Prestige Motors." Those words were like a bomb exploding in the air. Madeline, at this moment, couldn't hide her shock. She had just refused to sell a car to her new boss. And all that was left was a stunned silence in the room. Jordan didn't rush, just looked at her, his eyes showing no emotion. Finally, he sighed, put his hands in his pockets, and said coldly, "Miss Burke, you just refused to sell a car to your new boss." Those words, like a knife, cut through the air, leaving behind an indescribable coldness. Madeline's smile tightened. "We don't offer test drives at that price without proof of income. I'm sure you understand." The man's lips curved slightly, as if he'd been expecting this. "Oh, I see." Greg noticed the difference. This man wasn't defensive, wasn't arguing. He was simply observing. Madeline continued, "I'm sorry, but for a car this valuable, we only serve serious customers. We've had problems in the past with people wasting our time, having a fun test drive and then leaving." "Fun test drive," he repeated, his voice even. "I understand. But what if I want to buy in cash? No financing, no credit check." Does that change the test drive policy? Madeline almost laughed. People like him didn't buy six-figure cars in cash. They don't walk into a dealership and drop that much money, at least, not that she knows of. I appreciate your enthusiasm, she said, her voice sweet. But our policy is in place for good reason. A shadow of amusement crossed the man's face. I see. He shoved his hands into his pockets. So, what are the terms? Madeline smiled, but her smile faded. I just told you. We require proof of serious intent. Our cars are highly sought after, and we can't let them. I see. He interrupted, his voice still calm. I was just trying to figure out your standards. What does a serious customer look like? For the first time, Madeline blinked. There was a moment of hesitation, before she quickly regained her professional composure. I think we're done. If you want to see, feel free. But I have other clients to assist. Greg expected the man to react, to get angry, or to leave. Instead, he just nodded, smiling slowly. Of course, he said, then pulled a phone from his pocket, opened an email, and scanned the screen in front of Madeline. I thought you might be interested in this. Madeline glanced down, then froze. There was an email signature on the screen. Below it was his name and the title of CEO of a well-known tech company. She felt the blood drain from her face as he smiled. Now, he said, can I test drive my car? The sun was high in Buckhead, one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Atlanta, Georgia. The glass buildings reflected the bright afternoon light, while the bustling streets carried the quiet elegance of high-end cars rolling past. Inside Hamilton Prestige Motors, a dealership that prided itself on catering to the elite, Madeline Burke stood behind a polished mahogany desk, surveying the showroom like a queen ruling her domain. At 47, Madeline had spent nearly 2 decades in the luxury car business. She was more than a manager, she was a gatekeeper, ensuring that only the most deserving customers could own one of the mechanical marvels that gleamed under the showroom lights. Her experience had given her a proud eye for class and wealth, discerning who belonged and who didn't. The bell above the glass door rang. A man entered, tall, broad-shouldered, in his early 40s. He wore a simple navy hoodie, dark jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days than his appearance. His posture was relaxed, his expression unreadable. His eyes scanned the showroom floor, lingering on the shiny luxury SUVs and the awards hanging on the walls. In one look, Madeline decided everything she needed to know about him. This was not her type of customer. She turned to Greg, her sales associate, and whispered, "Don't waste your time." Greg hesitated, glancing at the man with a thoughtful expression. But he hadn't just come to look. The man walked toward a brand-new 2024 Range Rover Autobiography, pausing by the driver's door, his fingers lightly tracing the glossy black paint. Then he turned, his eyes locked on Madeline. Without hesitation, he walked straight toward her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and calm. "I'm interested in that Range Rover. I'd like to know more about it." Madeline barely contained her sigh. She'd seen this before, men who just wanted to impress someone with a test drive. They had no intention of buying. She gave a tight-lipped smile. "It's a full-size autobiography," she said evenly. "Top-of-the-line luxury, $165,000. The man nodded. "Sounds like what I'm looking for." Madeline crossed her arms. "Are you aware of our financing options? Such a purchase requires significant credit or a large down payment." The man stared at her, expressionless. "I won't need financing." She tried to hide her sneer. "I understand. But if you're serious about the purchase, we'll need to do a soft credit check before we proceed." "Company policy." Greg shifted uncomfortably. They both knew it wasn't company policy. But the man didn't react, didn't get upset, didn't object. He just pulled a shiny black card case from his pocket. I want to test drive it.